specifically. Some of us live in Trenton. Some of us worship here in Trenton.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about the capital city of New Jersey. Your honest opinions about the city. And just as a bit of a lead-in, it's less than 7.5 square miles, 7.5 square miles. It's the capital of New Jersey. George Washington became George Washington on the streets of Trenton, New Jersey. Therefore, I say this is where the country was really born, on the streets of Trenton, New Jersey. And often in my travels, I hear similar stories to what you've heard or what you told, where people say about how bad it is and how deplorable, and it's the armpit, and they give all these different names to the city. And then I often ask them, well, when's the last time you've been to Trenton? Or have you been to Trenton at all? Or when your family decided to leave Trenton, do they still own real estate in Trenton? And are they profiting from that real estate, etc.? And that draws for me a larger picture of the economics of Trenton, which then has all the other things that come behind it. Disenfranchised population, absentee landlords and property owners, etc. So I'd like for you all to talk about your personal experiences about Trenton, New Jersey, and I'd like for you to be as candid as possible in sharing your thoughts and concerns.
Okay. Well, as I said, when I first moved here, I was told, avoid Trenton completely. Don't even go there. It's dangerous. It's awful. Everything is horrible there. Until I went to sort clothes, and the neighborhood we saw, I mean, yes, there were buildings that didn't look right, but it didn't look as dangerous as they said to me. And then I frequently came to Trenton, and I said, okay, so poor people here. Yes, there are neighborhoods that are bad, but it's a question of working on it to get it better. That was my attitude, because I volunteered and did things here. And then after I graduated from seminary, I mean, I used to come to Westminster Presbyterian Church for events with the presbytery. But after I did my field education at Westminster, that I decided, oh, this is where I need to be. This is where I can do my ministry in Trenton and help people and young people get better, instead of just sitting down and completely condemning them, because that's my feeling about young people. When you spend half of your life saying, oh, they're all bad, and you don't get up and say, hey, let's have a chat and get to know them and work with them to help them come to be a better person, then you're of no use to anybody. Talking about them doesn't improve their lives, and condemning them doesn't help them. So that's why I'm here, to see what I can do to help them improve their lives. And my first goal was to get books. Let's start reading. Let's go on an adventure. So that's my impression of Trenton, from thinking it's awful and horrible and bad to thinking there is hope here. And I want to be part of that hope.
Thank you.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. So I can look at Trenton from two sides. Like I said, I moved here from Canada to Trenton. It was actually, compared to Canada, when I first got here, I was like, culture shock. I never had culture shock moving from Jamaica to Canada. But for some reason, when I came here, it was like, oh, so this is culture shock. Everything was different. I mean, everybody spoke too loud. To me, that's in my mind. And people they talk a lot. So that was, my thing. But I gradually grew into that, so that was never an issue. But as far as Trenton itself, I was never told. The only thing I remember when I heard the word Trenton, or if we spoke of Trenton, they were basically making jokes about Trenton. Not the violence, not the deterioration of everything. It was always, oh, you're from Trenton? You're from Trenton? And it was the joke. It was like, who wants to live in Trenton? So that's what I knew of Trenton, coming into Trenton. I lived in Trenton for many years. Both my daughters went to Trenton High. And to me, I guess because I was so focused on their education, I never had an issue. There was never an issue with both my girls going to Trenton High. So as many years I lived in Trenton, I can't even remember, to be honest with you. It was like a gradual thing for me. I bought my first house in Trenton. If it was that bad and the violence was that bad, I wouldn't have bought a house in Trenton. So there was a time when the violence was not the priority in Trenton. The deterioration of Trenton was not at the top of the list. There were things happening in Trenton. There were houses being built, low-income houses, where people who couldn't afford a house before. They started with these low-income houses. I remember the first low-income house was built in Trenton, and I applied for one. And of course, the list was so long, and they started building up Trenton. I remember, I worked downtown. I remember when the Woolworths was there. I remember when all those stores in the Commons were there. So for me, as the years went by, something started shifting. The violence in Trenton became the priority. And I'm like, when did this start happening? And then I experienced that violence through my son. Now, my son, like I said, we lived in Trenton. My intention was for him to go to Trenton High just like the girls did. There was never, I'm going to move out of Trenton because I don't want my kids in the Trenton school system. Because as a parent, I was very involved. I'm the type of parent that doesn't believe that it should be left upon the system or the teachers to make sure that my children benefited from the system. So I was very involved. My kids, when they're in elementary school, the teachers knew me. If there was an issue, I was there. So they knew me. So it was never like, my kids are not getting the best education, the teachers are crappy, you know what I'm saying? It was never like that. But then my son, for some reason, when he was in elementary school, he was not doing as well as I thought he could. And there was this wonderful lady, and I can't remember her name right now. She opened a charter school in Trenton on West State Street. I can't remember her name. And she knew about my son, and she said, why don't you, enroll your son in my school? And I did. And for the first year, he did okay. But then I noticed there was something going on, and I couldn't pinpoint it. And a teacher, I went to visit, and she said, I want to talk to you about your son. And she said, when he came to the school, he was a bright star. And his star is, the light is going out. And I think what he's doing, and that was the first time I heard this term, he's dumbing down himself to fit in. And I was like, you explain that to me. She said, he was the kid that would be the first one to have his hand up. He doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't give his point of view like he used to anymore. And I couldn't understand it. And then I would drop him off in the mornings, and I noticed there was just something. I couldn't pinpoint it. And I got a call one day that my son was attacked in the gym by a bunch of boys. And I went to get him, and there was like blood, like on his pants, his shirt, and it really shook me. And I said to my son, what happened? Like, you don't get in fights. What happened? Well, he said it's been months now that there's a bunch of boys that's been bullying him to join a gang. And they basically told me, you either join a gang or we're going to beat you down. So he chose being beaten down. And that's when I realized that there is violence. The violence, when it touches you personally, you start opening your mind. And then from there, I started like, yeah, there is this shift. There's this change that's going on. Like, you're hearing about the gangs and, every street corner there's a shooting. And that's kind of when I decided I probably need to move out of New Jersey just for my son so he could finish his education. The lady, Miss Morrison, that was her name, she begged me to keep him in the school. She said, I'll keep him in the, he can stay in my office during breaks, stay in, my office during lunch. I said, I don't want my son to be in school and have to be caged in like that. And then it's really started opening. And then that's what, from that point on, I started seeing the violence and the deterioration. Personally, can I sit there honestly and say, I am doing something to, to resolve this or help to participate in bringing back Trent to what I knew it to be. No, I'm not doing that right now. And there's no specific reason why I'm not. So I don't know if I didn't go.
No, that was fine, and that is one of the other points that we're going to address in a bit as well.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, growing up, all I'd see when's the last time you've looked at the Trenton newspaper and seen something positive? It happens. There are rare occasions, but most of the time the front cover is always drug bust, shooting, murder, something. Every morning going to the corner store, I look over, that's what I see, or on the news, or just hearing from people. And that was growing up. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a dangerous town. I probably want to be somewhere else. And I think the high point of that was a few years ago, and I was staying up playing video games, and I heard some guys fighting across the street. So I was like, oh, I'm a curious little boy. I'm going to look. And unfortunately, I didn't see enough where I could, help, but, the dude got pushed, and he reached into his back, pulled out a gun, and blew his brains, on the sidewalk, and I, was just, stunned, and I forgot, someone came down the stairs and was calling the cops, and then the neighbors came out, and a few minutes later, the whole block was, covered in police sirens, and all that. I was still, I just saw someone get their head blown off, and, it really, hit me deep, and that's what the city was for me growing up, and until I had this one teacher. Well, she was a substitute, but it was in high school, and she had these flyers for a show, and I was like, I've always wanted to see live music, and she had it, and it was, nearby, and I used to live, right in front of this place, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's not expensive, I'll go, this looks pretty interesting. That single show, me going there, me sneaking out to go there, actually, that was the day where everything changed, where I had no idea Trent had this culture and so many artists and so many people that I just didn't know about. I grew up seeing all the violence and all the, the darkness, but this one day I decided to, go to this place, and it just opened my mind, and I met so many awesome people, and everyone was so nice, and I just kept going back, and then I found this huge community of just artists and just musicians and just people helping, and I honestly don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't decide to sneak out that night, but it gave me a huge new perspective. And it's just this glimmer of hope that, yes, Trenton's fallen on some tough times, but if this can expand to the rest of the city or to the rest of the state or whatever, it's a huge game changer. Just what you're doing or anything else that anyone else can do. It's just gonna be a huge game changer if it really takes off.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
It was very, very tough what you have to say,
Yeah.
I live in the city for 15 years now. When we came here, the city was so different, very different. I remember if you just go in 7 p.m. to get some McDonald's or whatever, everything was closed by that time. It was, for us, it was kind of shocking because it was 24 hours living in New York, and now here, if you don't go early, forget it. All the stores were closed. And after that time, the demographics started changing. And I remember by 2006, 2007, I had the opportunity to go to Maryland to have some boot camp training during a whole week about it was some foundation that used to be called the Gamaliel Foundation, and they train you, how to move within especially the inner cities. And I met people from St. Paul, Minnesota, from St. Louis, Missouri, and they had exactly the same problems that we were having here. And I see this is not just one place. This is all over the country that we have these, let's say, old cities with old factories with a lot of brown fields, with and at some point, that calls my attention and say, what's going on here? And what I found was the inner cities, the people is living in kind of silos. When usually the rich people start living in the suburbs and they're paying some money for these people to stay there, and they start building these nice malls, these nice facilities, when even the people from the inner cities are going to spend their money there. And there is no tax revenue for this city, there is no big malls, there is no big supermarkets in these areas. So, in what all the surroundings are really good, and you can see the people from here saying, oh, I'm gonna go shopping in not Morrisville, but Oxford Valley or the Quaker Bridge Mall or going in Philly or New York. And so you're making some money here, but you're spending that money outside. So for the economic standpoint, that is kind of wrong. That it's kind of hurting, the base, the tax base within the whole community. But when I start, going back and see what's going on in the city, and I know the newspapers, they can tell you, the nightmares, but they don't show you the
Right.
good things, because the good things don't sell like the other ones,
Exactly.
right? So that's just, as you say, the darkness, and that's aside, that's one part. And usually, but there is so many things happening here in the city. Our biggest problem, and I always complain, it's that we don't have any source of information just going to all the levels of the communities that we have here. And when I say communities, it's because if you have some special education, you just probably move within that particular circle. If you're just working within the same field, you just go with that particular, and it's so many layers that you have no idea how to permeate all the layers at once. And that's probably one of the let's say situation that we have when you have that diversity that we have here. Now, in 2008, when the economy really went down, for me, I say thank God, because I was working for Corp America, and one day the sheriff said, look, everybody out. It was like 35 people out of the job one day. And I started, thinking, what am I going to do? And I have to pull myself together and say, look, I know this. I'm going to start my own company. 8 years later, which is today, I'm very happy that happened to me. And I'm very happy that happened to so many people. So we have to reborn or reinvent ourselves. And I'm very successful in what I'm doing right now. And I'm just, trying to help, the community as much as I can, giving back to the community, not just from the business standpoint. It's just for the community engagement, which it's more for me. Because at one point, you can be the voice of people that they really don't want to be heard. They want to be on the shadows. That's another story, another really long story. And when you start, like when you're making the dough and you say, I'm going to change this in this or that way, and you start helping a little bit the community, you put a lot of passion and a lot of love that you say, this is probably the best community that I have to be in and that I have to fight for.